A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far too historically confused for its own good, Coruscant. The Clone Wars have just begun. Yoda stands on the balcony of the Jedi Temple, hands on his cane, staring at the endless ranks of clone troopers assembling below. Gunships hum in the distance. The smell of ozone and fresh armor polish fills the air. Begun, the Clone Wars have. And then, flash. Not the Force, not a weapon, not even one of those Sith experiments. Just something. A wave of wrongness rips across the galaxy. The skyline blurs, the air goes silent, reality folds in on itself. And when the smoke clears, the Grand Army of the Republic is gone. And in their place is the Grand Army of the Republic, 1861 edition. Union blue coats, wool uniforms completely unsuited for Coruscant humidity, bayonets glinting in the city sun, rifles that take 20 seconds to reload. A drummer boy stands where a clone captain used to be, his eyes wide, his mouth hanging open at the sight of skyscrapers, speeders, and droids the size of houses. He looks at his drum. He looks at the sky. He quietly soils himself. The clones are nowhere. The entire chain of command is gone. In their place, regiments from Earth's Civil War era, muttering about the rebels in a way that's suddenly very confusing. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, Count Dooku sits in his command chamber aboard the Invisible Hand. He reaches for his communicator, his voice steady. "Generals, report." Nothing. The feed crackles, then snaps to life. Not Wat Tambor, not General Grievous, it's two men in gray uniforms staring into the holoprojector. One has a neatly trimmed beard and the calm composure of a man who can both quote scripture and order a cavalry charge without blinking. The other's eyes dart to every blinking light in the room, calculating threats like he's reading a battlefield map from another planet. General Robert E. Lee and Thomas Stonewall Jackson. Both confused, and both polite in that way where politeness is uncomfortable. Jackson leans toward the hologram and mutters, "General, I believe we are in hell." Lee adjusts his gloves, squints at Dooku, and says in the slow, deliberate tone of a man speaking to a ghost, "Sir, what manner of war is this?" In the background, a Confederate soldier pokes a droid with his bayonet. The droid screams, "Hey, watch it, pal!" and runs into a wall. The swap is complete. History is broken, and both sides are too proud, maybe too stubborn, to admit they have absolutely no idea what's going on. Palpatine doesn't blink. No explanation, no panic, just pure opportunism. Will that happen? Roll with it. To him, it's still a war, just one with worse uniforms, no armor plating, and a faint smell of pipe tobacco drifting through the Senate halls. He could use this. The Jedi are too stunned to object. Half of them are still standing at the temple balcony, watching Union regiments awkwardly form up in front of gunships, waving at pilots like they're about to board a paddle steamer instead of a dropship. The Separatists are too stubborn to stop. Count Dooku, holding his composure with aristocratic calm, simply accepts that his entire droid army is gone. Vanished. In its place, the Confederate States Army. Flesh and blood from head to toe. No B-1 chatter, no clanking metal ranks, and no tanks driven by AI. Just barefoot infantry, wool uniforms, and generals who think space combat just means shooting at a planet from a hill. Across Separatist space, the change is total. The shipyards, once swarming with droid workers, are now full of men staring at control panels like they're alien scripture. Confederate troops try to haul proton torpedoes with mules. One crew spends 3 hours looking for the chimney on a Munificent-class frigate so they can start a fire. No one addresses the most obvious problem. Without battle droids, the CIS war machine now has to feed, clothe, and house hundreds of thousands of living soldiers. Soldiers who get heat stroke under ship lighting and mutiny if the coffee runs out. Neither side knows why their armies have suddenly become smelly, confused Americans from before the invention of roll-on deodorant, but both sides are already planning the next offensive anyway. Mace Windu leads his new army? Union soldiers shuffle into dropships. The blaster racks? Useless, so they pile the ships with crates of ammo, a field cannon, and one guy still swearing by sabers. Not lightsabers, literal sabers, like the cavalry kind. They hit the surface of Moonlist and immediately see the Confederate States Army. Gray uniforms, battle flags, and the most aggressively misplaced war cries in galaxy history echoing off the chrome towers. One nervous private, gripping his musket like a life raft, tries to explain to Mace why they were fighting back home. He rambles about states' rights, taxation, and then, hesitating a little, he mentions slavery. You know, black slavery. The words hang in the air, heavier than the sound of distant artillery. Even the Confederate troops in earshot start looking anywhere but at Mace. Mace listens. He says nothing for a long, silent beat. Then, he nods slowly. The kind of nod that means somebody just made the worst mistake of their life. He turns to his men and says, "Hold your fire. I've got this." His lightsaber ignites with a snap hiss that drowns out every bugle on the battlefield. And then he moves. The Confederate lines fold like wet paper. Bayonets shatter. Rifles explode in the heat. Soldiers drop their muskets and run, some tripping over their own flags. A drummer boy takes one look at Mace Windu cutting through 3 regiments in under a minute and faints mid-beat. By the time the Union soldiers actually start to advance, there's nothing left for them to shoot at. Just a smoking line of discarded rifles, shredded uniforms, and this simple truth. Who doesn't want to watch Mace Windu murder a bunch of supporters of slavery? From that moment on, it's chaos. Every time the CIS tries to build a new droid, pop, a Confederate infantryman appears instead, polishing a musket and wondering why the sky is full of spaceships, then just immediately asking where the nearest supply of hardtack is. The more technically minded ones stare at the starship control panel, decide that it's probably witchcraft, and go outside to smoke a pipe instead. Every time the Kaminoans try to grow a new clone, pop, a Union soldier materializes instead, usually mid-sentence about tariffs, a railroad, or how they can't trust Missouri. They're not wrong. A few make the mistake of asking a Kaminoan where the nearest saloon is and how are deeply unsettled by the answer, we only serve nutrient paste. History isn't just broken, it's been duct taped together with 2 wars that should never have met, and this duct tape is already peeling. Training camps across the Republic are now full of blue-coated troops learning how to aim at droids that no longer exist. Separatist frigates, once run with a cold, mechanical precision, are now overcrowded with gray uniforms convinced they could blockade a hyperspace lane with a few cannons and a sternly worded letter. Confederate generals try to capture Gungan settlements with bayonets, only to be chased back to their ships by angry locals wielding energy shields and giant fish. Union troops are baffled by Wookiees, alternately trying to recruit them or put them in the regimental band. Galactic supply lines start collapsing under the strain of armies that require real food, real water, and regular breaks to argue about state boundaries that don't even exist anymore. Every military logistics officer in the galaxy is now one step away from a complete nervous breakdown. And no one, Jedi, Sith, or 19th century general, is willing to admit that they have no plan whatsoever. Instead, they grit their teeth, pretend that everything is fine, and keep marching towards the next battle as if the galaxy hasn't just been turned into the most confusing reenactment in history. It doesn't take long before both sides realize the other can't fight in space. Union artillery crews try to use a field cannon on a Venator's deck, aiming it at an enemy cruiser several kilometers away. The shot fell short. by several kilometers. The crew cheers anyway, congratulating themselves on a near miss, while the Republic naval officers, now stuck commanding armies of 19th century humans, just bury their faces in their hands. Confederate gunners, confronted with the starship's turbo laser controls, decide that they're too complicated, and instead they just start hauling powder kegs up to the bridge, just in case. One officer insists they could sink a Lucrehulk if they get close enough. No one corrects him, mostly because they want to see what happens. Boarding actions become comedy shows. Confederate troops start charging into sealed blast doors thinking they'll swing open like saloon doors, bouncing off of them with enough force to leave impressions in Durasteel. Union soldiers, meanwhile, refuse to wear vacuum suits at all, claiming that God didn't intend for man to breathe bagged air, and try to hold their breath for the entire spacewalk. Casualties mount from pure stubbornness. Meanwhile, we're lucky, because this universe was created by George Lucas. There's air in space now. Don't think about it. There's just air in space. You know, like when they land on the asteroid in Empire Strikes Back. There's air. That's fine. The Union troops simply walk across to enemy hulls, cannon in tow, as if they're crossing a windy street. The Confederates, for their part, set up campfires on a Lucrehulk's outer plating, and they start cooking beans between broadsides. The only real winners are the Mon Cal shipyards, whose engineers haven't stopped laughing in weeks. Some have started selling tickets to live reenactments of human space combat, complete with popcorn and souvenir telescopes. Palpatine doesn't just accept the swap, he sells it. Standing before the Senate, he declares the replacement of the clones with seasoned warriors from a proud heritage to be a brilliant strategic pivot. No mention is made of the fact that they can't read most Republic star maps, they refer to back to tanks as witch barrels, and they kept trying to pay for things in gold coins. Across the galaxy, Count Dooku hosts a massive Separatist rally on Raxus to unveil his new military leaders. General Lee and Stonewall Jackson step onto the stage to polite applause from the Nemoidians, Geonosians, and assorted alien delegates. Lee tips his hat, he thanks them for the warm welcome, and then he launches into a 20-minute speech about southern agriculture and the sacred duty of landowners. By minute 3, every Geonosian in the room is staring at the ceiling and wishing they were literally anywhere else, and they live on a desert planet. On Coruscant, the Senate goes feral. Union generals march in demanding representation for the free states of the Republic, slamming down a crude, hand-drawn map. It includes Alderaan, Kashyyyk, and for some reason Naboo, but it omits Coruscant entirely. When a Core World senator tries to debate tariffs with them, the argument somehow turns into a heated discussion about Missouri's right to self-governance, which no one present fully understands. What's Missouri? The Trade Federation tries to smooth things over by signing an exclusive supply deal with Confederate blockade runners. Negotiations collapse after the blockade runners insist on being paid in gold bars, tobacco, and that green liquor the Twi'leks drink. Yeah, that one that makes your eyelids spin. Propaganda becomes its own battlefield. Republic posters now feature hand-painted Union soldiers holding lightsabers awkwardly. Separatist holo broadcasts try to show Confederate troops marching in perfect formation, but the unedited footage clearly captures them stopping mid-march for a smoke break and a round of cards. The Jedi Council tries to mediate between the politicians and their 19th century armies. Meetings quickly spiral into shouting matches about the states' rights and the will of the Force, with Yoda spending most of his time staring into the middle distance and wondering if he could fake his own death a few years early this time. The Jedi Council has questions. Urgent ones. The war has gone from bad to bizarre, and they need to speak with Master Windu, their most senior field commander, about adapting strategy to two 19th century armies that can't navigate hyperspace without vomiting. So, they schedule a meeting. He doesn't show. They try again the next day. Still no Mace. At first, they assume hyperspace delays. Then, Republic military briefings? Then, maybe some kind of political wrangling in the Senate. No, the truth is far simpler. Mace Windu is just too busy killing Confederates. The reports trickle in slowly at first. The Siege of Mygeeto, where Windu personally dismantled 4 regiments in the time it took Union soldiers to unpack their rifles. The liberation of Seleucia, where Confederate artillery collapsed under a one-man assault before their cannons even fired. An incident on Ryloth where he walked into a fortified street lined with sharpshooters and came out on the other side without a mark, followed by 200 men who no longer had functioning muskets, flags, or limbs. Then the updates become constant. Every dispatch from the front includes, "And then Mace Windu showed up." Holocalls to him are never directly answered, instead a frazzled aide, often some bewildered Union lieutenant, answers panting, Mr. Windu says he's occupied." Behind them the sounds of war, rifle fire, panicked screaming, the sharp snap hiss of a lightsaber, and Mace barking orders like, "Cut them off at the bridge!" followed by something wet hitting the ground. The council tries to insist that he return to Coruscant for at least one tactical review. An hour later, they get a transmission. The visual is grainy, shaking from helmet cam footage. Mace is sprinting through a trench, bullets whipping past his head, his lightsaber a purple blur as he bats them away and slices muskets in half mid-shot. Over the comms he yells, "Tell the council they can wait. I'm busy ending slavery." 3 days later, another scheduled meeting time comes and goes. The only message the council receives is a casualty report from Christophus. Republic losses 7. Confederate losses, yes. By week 3, the Jedi stop pretending. They don't even ask where Mace Windu is anymore, they just pull up the latest battle maps and find the largest, most lopsided casualty count in the Republic's favor. That's where he is. The longer the war lasts, the stranger the daily life of the war becomes. Union chaplains set up Sunday services in Republic bases, complete with hymnals and folding chairs. Jedi wandering, confused, assuming it's another briefing. When they're told it's for worship, they nod politely and respond, "The Force is with us always," which the chaplains will clearly find inadequate. Confederate pastors try to bring the word of God to alien civilizations. Sermons about God's plan quickly go off the rails when delivered to species with 3 genders, a 20-year molting cycle, and no concept of heaven. One sermon on Tatooine ends with the Rodian asking if salvation comes with a free drink voucher. Confederate cavalry officers complain speeder bikes don't have proper reins, and they begin attaching leather straps and stirrups. One even adds a saddle horn for stability, despite the bike having no seat at all. Union engineers, appalled at the soullessness of pristine starship interiors, start ripping out perfectly functional components and replacing them with brass gauges, polished wood paneling, and oil lamps that serve no actual purpose in a pressurized, fully lit environment. Union troops demand coffee strong enough to strip paint, horrifying Kaminoan nutritionists who classify it as a controlled substance and try to ration it. The rationing fails when the soldiers start brewing it in blaster packs. Confederates refuse to touch protein cubes, insisting on cornbread, salted pork, and whiskey. The Techno-Union tries to replicate this with nutrient paste, cornbread-flavored rations, and synthetic whiskey that tastes like sadness and floor cleaner. Soldiers swap weapons out of sheer stubbornness. Union muskets for Confederate blasters, Confederate muskets for Union blasters, without any noticeable tactical improvement. Confederate sharpshooters openly mock long-range blaster rifles as cheatin', right up until they watch one vaporize a target half a mile away. They immediately accuse the shooter of witchcraft and file a formal complaint. Confederate officers attempt to explain a 19th century etiquette to Twi'lek entertainers. It ends pretty much how you'd expect, with the entertainers walking out, the officers red-faced, and an entire mess hall banned from the cantina forever. Union military bands attempt to recruit Wookiees as drummers, only to discover that even a gentle tap from a Wookiee's paw produces enough shockwave to blow out the hangar windows. Rehearsals are discontinued after the 3rd structural collapse. So, not droids versus clones, not Sith versus Jedi, this is Union versus Confederacy, in space. Armies that barely understand what a planet is now wage war across dozens of them. Speeder bikes with saddles, Star Destroyers with wood paneling, Sunday services in hangar bays, Mace Windu racking up kill counts that make history books blush. The Republic and the Separatists push forward, both sides convinced they could bend these armies to their will. They can't. Because the war has become something no tactician, Force Vision, or Senate committee could have ever predicted. It's an interstellar reenactment gone wrong. And this is only the first chapter. Next time, maybe more battles, more blunders, more history colliding with hyperspace. Because the galaxy isn't ready for part 2, but it's coming anyway. This has been Canon Chaos. What if the CIS and CSA armies swap? Part 1.